and welcome everyone. Super excited to go through Tasktop's own journey. As the title says, this is all about the concept of project to product and how we transition to product-aligned value streams. And I think that a lot of what we have gone through is just relevant to everyone. These are universal problems that I'm going to talk through, or maybe problems is too strong of a word, situations that we experienced in doing this. And I think many others can benefit from our journey as well. So as I said, the title is How We Transition to Product-Aligned Value Streams. But the title that I really wanted to call it was simply, Oh My. Oh My. Oops, sorry. Oh my. Oh, I'm cheating. Go back. Does moving to product value streams really involve all of that? It is quite, there's a lot to it, and a lot of areas that maybe we didn't even realize that we were going to encounter, or things that we needed to deal with. So in the course of this last year, we've been doing this for about the last year, almost exactly a year now. I have found that I use the phrase "oh my" quite a bit in this journey. And I think it's a really good phrase because it evokes kind of empathy and thoughtfulness without judgment. And I think one of the most important things when embarking on something as big as a transition to product value streams is that you can't judge yourself all along the way with all the things that might not go as smoothly or as exactly as you wanted it to go. So before I really jump into our journey, I thought it would be helpful just to do a quick level set on, I call this the cheat sheet for project to product. I know Laurel's going to send out the webinar, but maybe take a quick screenshot of this, because this I think is a very easy summarized way to kind of understand the primary differences between project oriented mindset and product oriented mindset and organization. So, and we're going to be coming back to these through the course of our conversation today. So there's clearly a project to product movement afoot, and which is really exciting to see. And you see things like Gartner, their latest CIO survey said that 55% of IT organizations are moving from project to product. And so there's clearly this movement afoot. Is that why, is that why Tasktop kind of embarked on our product value stream journey? And the truth of the matter is, not really. That's not really what motivated us. What motivated us was simply that we were flummoxed. We were flummoxed. We're a product company, so aren't we product oriented? And if you take a step back and you look at those again, those items that really delineate the differences between project and product, surface level, we ticked all the boxes. And things seemed good. We're a product company. We had feature-based teams. We do prioritization appropriately, etc. But we definitely had issues. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the symptoms that we had. And this was even, with the best intentions of how we were structured and organized. But one of the symptoms we had was a bit of an us versus them, attitude. And I'm going to talk more about that. Actually, I'm going to talk more about all of these things. Another symptom we had is that problems had to go way too high up to get resolved, which is never good. We were finding that we had a lack of knowledge about and empathy for our customers. We were beginning to feel more inward focused than outward focused. And I think that one, number 4, when we really realized that, that was kind of the crowning moment of, we've got to do something about this. And then were we really focused, were we really product focused truly throughout the entire organization? And that was something that we were pondering. And then the last symptom, I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a Southerner, and twice baked potatoes are amazing when your mom or your grandmom makes them for you. But you don't want twice-baked investment decisions. And all of our investment decisions had to get essentially twice-baked, bought in on the product side and then bought in on the engineering side. And so these were all of the symptoms that we were facing. But again, when we kind of did the check marks of the list of things to know if you're running project to product, things seem to be going pretty well. So what was it? Hence the flummoxed aspect of this. And then it really began to dawn on us, and that is that mindset is everything. So the context and the structure within which you operate makes a tremendous difference to your outcomes. And so as we really kind of dug into this, what we realized is that product thinking, yes, you have the check boxes of the 7 aspects of project to product, but product thinking is really a mechanism for customer first. And it's always about thinking from the customer perspective first. So what we did is we decided to go back to the set of 7 items and look at them each from the lens of a customer versus our internal lens. And when we did that, what we discovered is that our teams we weren't thinking customer first from a team's perspective. And so I'm going to walk through what we mean by that, because I think when I walk through the example, it'll be very obvious what we discovered. So here is how we used to be structured. We have a CEO, Mick, and then we had a VP of product, that was me, and a VP of engineering. Seems very normal. This is very common for how product companies are structured. But here's the result of that. The view of team actually is delineated, and where you can see the green boxes. So the engineers viewed themselves as separate from the product team. And this is really where we got this us versus them symptom. It creates this kind of product versus engineering attitude. All the difficult decisions have to go all the way up to the CEO. And that's very important. You know, we know that empowered teams, the most important thing is to push down decision making as much as humanly possible. And our structure was causing us have to make decisions go up. And most importantly, and really this is the crux of the whole matter, is that this was very much an internal view of team. This was structured out of convenience or out of desire internally, not how a customer sees us. And so I'm going to walk through the flip side of this, how a customer sees us. Because if you bought Hub, our flagship product, as a customer, you bought Hub. That's one thing. You don't think you're going to one part of the organization if you are having a question or an issue with your user experience, and another part if you have a defect that you need engineering to fix. But this structure actually made it where that was the case. So instead, the customer view of the team is that all of this is one. All of the roles that make a team successful are part of one team, not 2 teams. And so what we did, well, and I think it's obvious that I'm going to keep coming back to this theme of that product thinking embodies customer first. So once we kind of took that step back and said, okay, well, this is how a customer views the team. That's what enabled us to then make a pretty significant change. So instead of having a CEO and VP of product, VP of engineering, we reorganized so that we have a VP of product development. That's actually my new role. And then we have a product value stream lead for each product that we have. And so the teams are at the product value stream level. And that now this is the view of team. And it's this we that matches how customers see us, which is probably the most important part. And you can see then that on the team you have product people, user experience people, engineers, all encompassed in one product value stream. This is what really this is probably the most important thing that came out of this, and that is that decisions were able to be pushed down. Almost all decisions are now able to be made directly within a product value stream or between product value streams. And I'm going to talk more about that as well, because there is always, especially if you're an organization of any scale, there are always dependencies. You obviously you try and limit dependencies as much as you can, but it's inevitable that you're going to have dependencies between product value streams. But decisions are able to be made usually within the product value stream team or between product value streams. And as I already mentioned, dependencies still matter, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that as well. So the rest of this webinar, what I'm going to do is go through two things. Number one, what happened? What did we actually do? And then what happened because of what happened? And not surprisingly, this is usually the part that people kind of can really connect with about the what happened because of what happened around doing this. But first, let me walk through the what happened. So we introduced a new role called a product value stream lead. And we moved from a product team and an engineering team to a single product development team. So we now have one single product development team with 4 product value streams. 2 are internal facing product value streams and 2 are external facing product value streams. We could give a whole webinar on the notion of what to do with internal facing product value streams, which I'm not going to go into great detail around that today, but I do really want to point out that especially in large organizations, you have a very significant number of internal facing product value streams. And yet it does not at all mean that you aren't customer focused, customer thinking first, customer first, because every single product has a customer. People often ask, how do you know what delineates the product value stream? Every single product has a customer. And once you realize who that customer is, your customer might be your internal finance team. It might be an internal audit team. It's still a product, and those you need to look at things through the lens of those customers. So that's what we physically did. Introduced new role, reorged into a product development organization, and then every product value stream. The default top-level structure is to have a product value stream lead, and then an engineering manager and a product manager. And when I give this talk live, I usually ask the following question: how many of you have ever heard of a product value stream lead? And generally speaking, no hands go up. And so we, as any good citizen today would do, if you're looking for information about how to do something, you of course would Google it. So we Googled it, and we got back absolutely nothing. So we knew that we were on our own and figuring this out, but we intuitively really believed that there was a need for this specific type of role. And so what we did is we have product value stream lead and still a product manager. And what I tell everyone when they ask this question is you absolutely need both. There's no question that you need both, and neither are project managers. And there's absolutely a need for project managers, especially in large-scale organizations, to kind of run, to deal with kind of cross-cutting initiatives. But in terms of running a product, what you need is a product manager and a product value stream lead. And so I'm going to talk more about the differences and the distinctions between those two roles, because this is really, we've found it to be quite interesting. So I don't expect everyone to read this in detail, but this is the job description for a product value stream lead. And I want to call out a couple of aspects of it. So first, their primary responsibility is for all aspects of their product value stream, both business, meaning vision, design, customer happiness, cost, pricing, understanding market changes, operational and technical. So being able to run agile teams, doing estimation, engaging with your architecture team. So all aspects of your product value stream. I think the next bullet is extremely important. They are the drivers. They determine, your product value stream lead determines your flow item distribution. And the flow item distribution is the ratio of features, defect, debt, and risk that your product value stream teams are going to focus on. I'm pretty sure I talk about this later, but just want to make sure and point out that a product value stream can absolutely have multiple teams, multiple feature teams within that. And then the product value stream lead is responsible for setting the objectives, results, and measuring the success of your product value stream. So what is the product manager responsible for? So, and I say this constantly, that the primary job of a product manager, and it is a super hard thing to do, is prioritization, prioritization, prioritization. The ability to prioritize all the flow items, as this says, by deeply understanding all of your stakeholder needs, customer, field, analysts, and understanding technical trade-offs to ensure efficient delivery of prioritized flow items. That is the role of the product manager. As part of that, they do also have feature design responsibility of an entire product, which also, I think, having been a former product manager myself, I think people often underestimate how much time it actually takes to do innovative and good feature design. And they may also sometimes assume the product owner role on one or more teams. So I think it's helpful to kind of side by side do a comparison of product value stream leads and product managers. So product value stream lead is about the whole picture, paying attention to the business, operational, and technical needs. The product manager is all about prioritization, 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 which, by the way, the relationship between the product manager and the product value stream lead is extremely important, because in order to prioritize well, the product manager needs to have a good sense of the business and the operational aspects as well. The product value stream lead has very significant people management duties. It's very much a people manager role, whereas product manager generally has no or very little people management duties. Generally, the product value stream lead does not do feature design, whereas the product manager does very significant feature design. And by the way, this is not to say that there aren't other roles that help in the feature design, a user experience designer, the engineers involved, but in terms of driving the feature design, it's really the product manager. And then last, but definitely not least, is what flow metrics are most important for that role. So at Tasktop, we very strongly believe, as you hear lots of us out there in the industry talking about, the power of the 5 core flow metrics, and they really should all be used together. But I do like to just kind of highlight where the main focus area is for the 2 different roles. So for the product value stream lead, it's primarily around setting the flow distribution and understanding flow efficiency, top-level flow efficiency. Product manager, as I said before, is about making sure that it's efficient delivery of those features. So flow time, flow load, and flow velocity are significant focuses for product managers. So here are 2 of our product value stream leads. One is a former engineering manager, one is a former product manager. And so I think it's interesting to get their take and see some of the differences that they bring to the role. It's absolutely true that the role is going to take on the shape of the history and background and context that the lead brings with them. And so Lucas, who's the former engineering manager, says that the product value stream lead role creates team agency, combining product management, design, and technical execution along with a whole business lens. And he says it has very little to do with being an actual product manager. Jeff on the right, the former product manager, he really believes strongly that it requires them to speak in terms of business results, which again really helps be thinking from a customer first perspective. And then I like to point out at the bottom that it forces him to delegate the role of technical lead to someone on the team, and this should serve to empower the team to do what they think is best. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a good product value stream lead. Number one, they have to be business minded. They have to really care about business results and have kind of an intuition about business results and how to drive business outcomes. They need to have a vision for their product. By the way, the product manager absolutely also has to have that shared vision. The whole team does, but the kind of the driving force of that vision is the product value stream lead along with the product manager. They have to be empathetic, and I'm going to come back to this one in a couple minutes when we talk about another piece. They absolutely need to be strong people managers. Very, very important. They need to be multilingual, and this is where I'm going to talk about empathy. So when I say multilingual, I don't really mean that you have to speak Spanish and French and German, etc., but you have to be able to speak to a lot of different constituencies, because on your team you have engineers, you have designers, you have product folks, you have QA folks. You also need to be able to speak to analysts and to customers and to any of the stakeholders involved in your product value stream. So you need to be able to be multilingual, and that's where empathy comes into play as well, being able to kind of put yourself in their shoes and understand what drives them. And last, but definitely not least, is that you have to care about how the sausage is made. And it's really interesting. I highlight these two together because it's actually pretty tricky to find the mix of skill set whereby someone is both business minded and really does care about how the sausage is made, meaning how execution happens. So these are what we have learned that make a good product value stream lead. Some other considerations. First, if you're going to embark on this in your organization, don't be blind. The specific individuals matter. So if you have someone who's a former engineering manager and they're interested in being a product value stream lead, know that they're going to bring their engineering context and history to the table, and be mindful of that. And maybe, as an example, give them more of the technical focused products in your product value stream. As I said, context and background matters. So if you have people that are coming from a more customer-focused front, so maybe, for instance, you have someone who is on a career path to be a product value stream lead who comes from the support organization. Well, that they're going to come kind of with that support mindset, which can be very helpful. This one is very interesting. Do you need other adjacent or cross-cutting roles? And the answer to that question, I've learned over the last year, is yes, you do. And in fact, we've introduced a new role at Tasktop. We just introduced it about a week ago, actually, of Vice President of Product Development Operations. And this role is dedicated to looking across at cross-cutting concerns across all of the product value streams. Great example of this would be, especially in large organizations, where you very much want probably similar engineering best practices applied to security and risk aspects of all of your products, and you want some kind of consistency around that. So there are definitely things that are cross-cutting that warrant significant attention. And then last, flexibility. It's very important to have and allow for flexibility within product value streams. So we have one product value stream that wants and has a role of team lead, others that don't. And so you don't want to be dictating kind of past the general guidelines of what constitutes a product value stream. So next, I want to talk a little bit about being intentional versus being perfect. So I get this question all the time, which is, okay, I buy it, let's do it. But how am I going to organize, how do I delineate perfectly what all of my products are? Because usually things are a bit, as life always is, a bit messier than maybe what you think. And so I think that what I always say to people is, rather than striving for perfection, strive for being intentional. Make the decisions intentional, even if they aren't necessarily perfect, just meaning having thought them through. And this next picture, I think, is really helpful always try and put the glasses on of how your customer would see it. That's how the easiest way to make sure you're being intentional is through every step of the way, take a step back and say, okay, if I did this, what would my customer think of this? How would a customer view this? And so you try and delineate your product value streams as close to how as how a customer would see it, but then layer in and be okay with layering in the practical realities on top of that. So for instance, you probably don't want a product value stream larger than 100 people. Okay, so you might have, you know, a product that actually has 300 people working on it. You probably need to figure, and that's how a customer might think of it, but you probably need to figure out how to delineate that into smaller chunks. The shared component thing is always, I think I have a slide on this. Yes, always the hot potato. Make sure that you consider that shared services, frameworks, components are products themselves, and that their customer is often another product value stream. And be okay with that, and have a product value stream that is around some shared services. A great example of this is something around the shopping cart service or the billing service. But be careful that you aren't kind of siloing that product value stream. This is where I was talking earlier about relationships between product value streams. They're important, and as I mentioned before, dependencies will exist, right? So you can't have a front-facing product that needs to be billed without the billing people. So dependencies will exist, and I would argue that you should relish them rather than shirk them, and go in intentionally with intention and knowing that those dependencies can be there, and making sure to come up with communication strategies, et cetera, to help manage them. So now, what happened because of what happened? So I've gone through what we actually did, and now I'm going to talk about what happened because of what happened. So the biggest thing I learned through the course of this is that people don't resist change, they resist loss. And what we should have done is go through and create what's called a loss map ahead of rolling out all of these organizational changes. We did not. I wish we had. And so what a loss map really allows you to do is not focus on the change that you're embarking on, but rather focus on what do the different constituencies that are going to be affected by this change, what do they feel that they're going to lose, and then help them first acknowledge that there's a loss and try and overcome the loss, try and either certainly address it, but also try and make sure to fix it so that it is no longer a loss. So when we went through this with the two main constituencies that were affected, the engineers and the product folks, all of a sudden becoming one team, on the engineering side, there was a concern that there would be a loss of the engineering culture. I heard that phrase quite a bit. I'm worried we're going to lose the engineering culture. So we actually then spent a lot of time helping understand what people perceived that culture to be and helping them identify, but you're not losing that, which is interesting. Another loss that they were concerned about was being managed by non-engineers, and really at the end of the day, being managed by strong people managers is the most important thing. And we also make sure that, as I showed on the previous slide, every team has an engineering manager and a product manager, and the engineers report into the engineering manager. So you're managed by engineers. And would they no longer be insulated from a lot of the things that get thrown at you from a customer perspective? And that one we actually intentionally wanted some of the insulation to be gone, and we talked that through. On the product side, they were concerned of being swallowed up because there's far more engineers than there are product people, and they were concerned that in this combined team, they would be kind of lost in the shuffle. And they were also concerned, all of a sudden, are they going to be responsible for all of the technical details? And the answer to that, of course, is no. However, they are responsible, again, for that the overall distribution, and that does involve getting more involved in kind of defects and understanding what defects are most important, etc. And then they just were a little bit concerned around a kind of lack of clarity of what everyone's roles were. And I'm going to talk more about that next, because really at the end, everyone was mostly concerned about career path confusion. And what does it mean to be a product value stream lead? So what we did, the biggest thing that we did was we went back and we reviewed all of the careers, and we created career ladders for every different type of role within a product value stream from the lens of now being organized as a product value stream. And so we really did go through role by role to make sure that we had a career ladder and path for every single role that might exist. Spent quite a bit of time on that. So one question that I also get asked is who leads? Who leads this product development organization? And it can be someone that is either has a product background or an engineering background, either one. I think what's most important, though, is that second bullet, which is whichever background you bring to the table, the resulting optics and tone are driven by that. So if you have your product development organization leader coming from the engineering background, the tone and the optics will be different than if they come from a more of a product background. And so whoever takes on that role needs to really overcompensate for the role that they did not necessarily come from, right? So since I have come from a strong product background, I make sure and communicate a lot with, for instance, our QA folks, so that they know that QA is top of mind as well. Ensuring the career tracks is the most important thing. And then whoever leads the organization needs to be able to feel comfortable with and be able to communicate with executives regularly. So does the story end here? And the answer to that question is, oh my, definitely not. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about, this is Paul and Jeff and Mick. Paul's in finance, and he came with questions like, you want me to give you budget and revenue numbers based on what? Product value streams? Jeff in sales, why are you talking to me about these technical debt thingies? And then Mick, our CEO, was very concerned, am I going to get consistent reporting and visibility across all products? So I'm really going to dig into just Paul, because I think it's very interesting to understand how doing something that seemingly was good from a product development perspective really has far-reaching effects in the organization. So Paul taught me a lot about the world of finance, and in his world, he focuses a lot on our investors, and anyone on the finance side will focus on making sure that your stakeholders that are your investors are well cared for. So, but we on the internal side, we're saying, well, we want to be product value streams. So here comes his dichotomy. Investors need consistent comparison, not just within an organization, but across different organizations. But product value streams are inherently unique. The way a big bank, bank number one, is going to structure their product value streams is definitely going to end up being different than bank number two, because they are inherently unique and have nuances around how your particular organization functions. Investors are driven by very traditional reporting and systems. Product value streams require different reporting. You hear lots of talk now about reporting based on the 5 core flow metrics and business outcomes, very different than traditional reporting and systems. And then last but certainly not least, investors, Paul has to work within specific laws, and certain things have to be done and reported on in certain ways due to the laws that exist. Whereas product value streams, you're really striving for allowing for that flexibility to kind of orient and reorient around customer, and it's really an internal approach. So the result of for poor Paul is that He now, in the last year, had to do kind of double reporting because he has to report to the investors in the way that they're used to. But then with product value streams, he's creating reports so that we can get everything from an individual product value stream perspective. We are working on making Paul's life easier. I need to check in with him to see how we're doing on that so far. But I just think that's a really interesting story and indicative of maybe how kind of complex moving to a product value stream world can be, because it affects not just one part of the organization, but all of the organization. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is just this concept of conversation changers. So in the course of moving to product value streams, what's most important is that you're making sure that you're having the right conversations. And the 4 flow item types are at the crux of allowing for these conversation changers. So I'm going to highlight them here: feature, debt, defect, and risk. And our conversations now are very different. Every quarter we do release planning, and we make sure that every item that is going to be built or focused on in the next quarter is categorized between feature, debt, defect, and risk, so that all of the stakeholders understand the distinction and how much work is being done on each one. And that in and of itself has changed dramatically how we interact and talk with our business counterparts. What I'm showing here actually is the slides that we use when we're going through release planning, and we make sure to talk about the benefits for customers and the benefits for Tasktop as an organization for each one of the items that is going to be built. And that really leads into flow distribution, which is, I don't know, maybe I go in phases of which of the flow metrics I'm kind of partial to, but at the moment I'm partial to flow distribution, because I think having that macro view across the organization of what percentage of your effort is going towards features versus defects versus risk versus tech debt is very important in understanding the execution of your strategy and how likely you are to succeed at your strategy. So as an example, if you aren't actively focusing on risk, in particular security risk, which is top of mind for many people today, the likelihood that you're going to run into some big problems in the future is pretty high. So it's important that everyone is focused on understanding that the workload that is put upon the product development team spans all 4 of these, and always spans all 4 of these. And yes, of course, if we all lived in the world we want to live in, it would only ever be about building features, but that's not the reality. And so this, as I said, is a conversation. It's not really, I guess it's not really a conversation changer. It's a conversation starter to make sure that you're focused and talking about all of the aspects of the work that's important to make a product successful. So I focused on flow distribution, but just to make sure to level set, there are 5 flow metrics: flow time, flow distribution, the one I focused on, flow load, flow efficiency, and then you can see the actual time involved as well. And so it is important that you're always kind of looking at all 5 of them, including flow velocity, and then getting some summary statistics around both your predicted and versus your actual. So what were the major pitfalls in going through this journey for us? I would say that change management is always the hardest part, and intuitively we all know that, but it is really always the hardest part. And I think there's always this tricky balance of making sure that big changes like this people don't feel that they're being imposed upon them, but rather driven by, right? We need to recognize that the entire organization won't operate this way instantly. My story about Paul and finance. And last, it really is true though, the worst thing is that PVS is a terrible acronym, and I don't know how to make it good. Where do you put the apostrophe? How do you make it plural? It's a terrible acronym. But there you have it. Those were the major pitfalls for us. What were our major victories? Overall, we have a much much more customer focused organization. There's much less of an us versus them and more of a we are in this together. Investment decisions no longer are twice baked. It's much easier to make investment decisions and get them implemented. And Mick does get his consistency of reporting, which is great. So what's next for us? We're working on kind of common language being used across the whole company. Not easy to do. Even the concept of the language of product value stream is new to us. And then the 5 flow metrics and talking about feature, defect, debt, and risk. Dependencies are still viewed often as bad. And so we want to work on that. As I mentioned, we have introduced a cross-cutting role. And we want to change more of how we're communicating with our executives around how we talk about the flow metrics and the flow items, more kind of in our day-to-day communication with them. And the last thing is that you can't speed up time. The changes that we put in place have been in place for about a year. And I think there's, if I could have sped up the last year, I would have, but you can't. And there's still much more to come in our journey as well. So that's kind of it. What's next for y'all? I would encourage you to take a step back, think from a customer perspective, and talk about architecting your end-to-end product value streams, and really dig into what product value streams would look like in your organization. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Laurel.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. And just as a reminder for everyone, if you do have questions, please put them in the questions box. We do have a couple questions that came in, so I will just kick them off. The first question we have is, why couldn't both roles, product value stream lead and product manager, be performed by the product owner?
Well, my simple answer to that question is that it is way too much work. It is more than a full-time job to be a product manager and take the proper time to do the feature design and prioritization. And the product value stream lead role is a tremendous amount of work. So I guess that's the easy answer. Now, I will say we don't always have, depending on the size of the product value stream, all the roles accounted for. So we have had a product value stream where the product value stream lead actually also acted as the engineering manager. So you have to think through the size of your organization and the size of that particular product value stream. But I also think, as I'm thinking about this, it's a super good question. I think combining all of these roles also undersells the importance of having each of them as a first class. This is the focus area for this different role. So I think you don't want to, I don't know, I guess kind of undersell or invalidate the importance of each of those individual roles. But it really does boil down to time. They're all full-time jobs, without a doubt.
Awesome, thank you. The next question we have is somewhat similar, but what is the product value stream lead background?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I would love to explore this as more people go down this path and see where they're seeing success. But as I mentioned, there isn't a set path. You can have more of an engineering background, you can have more of a product background. I would argue that as long as you have the ability to have that business-minded quality along with caring about how the sausage is made, that's the most important thing to make sure that you'll be successful at it. We have product value stream leads. Some came from an engineering background, some came from a product background, and we've had success with both. I will add to that I think if you're coming from whichever side you're coming from, you need to make sure that then you have a super strong opposite for engineering manager or product manager to make that more concrete. If you are coming from an engineering background, and so you're the product value stream lead coming from an engineering background, make sure that you have a very strong product manager, because you're probably going to lean on them more because you have potentially less of a background in that than your engineering manager because you've done that, and so you kind of intuitively know more about that. So I think you really need to view those three roles, product manager, engineering manager, and product value stream lead, as sort of a trifecta of strength.
Awesome, thank you. The next one is, does a product architect role exist? More of the industry refers to an enterprise architect focused on enabling business outcomes and less of a technical architect.
Yes, that's a super interesting question, and I think that is being talked about as it absolutely should be. Some people are calling them value stream architects, and I think that's a really interesting role, especially at very large scale organizations, and also because a lot of this is so new that it's about education and helping organizations move in this direction. So I definitely see value in that role. I think uh, actually Dominica DeGrandis and I were talking about this yesterday, and she's going to be giving a talk about the different roles that need to exist, and I think she's going to be talking about that role specifically. I think there's a lot of kind of questions about that role and what it would specifically be, but intuitively I think we all agree that it does need to be there at some level, especially for larger organizations. And I think that role will be part educator and part what's the word I would choose? Part educator and part execution focused around how to scale doing product value streams across a very big organization.
Awesome. The next question, kind of two-part question, is, were there project managers in the product development organization at Tasktop prior to your transformation? And does that mean you don't have project managers within your organizational structure anymore?
So we did not have project managers, and that is typically software companies that are already product, we're not a bank, we're not a retail organization, we're not an insurance company. It's pretty common that we would not have had project managers, so we did not and do not. I think in a large scale organization, it's going to be a little bit different around that. I often get the question, can a project manager become either a product manager or product value stream lead? Again, I think it's all about skill set rather than pigeonholing, saying, well, if you're a project manager, you can never be this thing over here. But there's absolutely still a need for project management, especially around kind of initiatives across an organization, like a go-to-market initiative or whatever the case may be. But we do not have project managers within product value streams, and we didn't in our previous organization as well. These are great questions, Laurel. This is fun.
Yeah, we've got some really great ones. Keep them coming. The next question is, what's the difference between product owner from the Agile methodology versus a product value stream lead or PM?
Yeah, I knew that was going to happen, but it was going to come to me, and probably there will be people on this call that are like, she's not right, that's not how it's supposed to be. But to me, well, it also a little bit depends on your definition of product owner. But to me, product owner is very much a specific role on a team, and every team needs to have a product owner. So if you have a product value stream that has 3 feature teams, you need a product owner on each one of those teams, because that product owner is responsible for helping with the day-to-day execution of the priorities that were set by the product manager. And keep in mind that the product manager sets the priorities, not the product value stream lead. The product value stream lead sets the flow distribution, the strategic flow distribution. The product manager then translates that into the priorities for instance, the upcoming, say, 2 months or whatever it is. And then the product owner really ushers through those priorities. That one might get some, I would love to have more conversations around that, because I think some people differ with me on that viewpoint, but that is my viewpoint.
Awesome. All right. The next one is, what are some strategies for managing communication and dependencies between internal and external product teams?
Yes, so I think this one again it's just very hard, but in terms of communication strategies between them, what the worst thing you can do is put a box around let's say an internal product value stream and say no one can contribute to that product value stream in terms of being able to contribute code as an example. So you don't want to have closed communication whereby you have to like kind of go up and over in order to get something done. And so you want them to be open, but then with visibility to know, you know, what was done and by whom and for what purpose. So I think a combination of making sure your product value streams are kind of open-minded and both concretely and figuratively, and then also making sure that, so for instance, for us, we have a weekly meeting between the leads and the product managers and the engineering managers across all of our product value streams. And we actually have had, it actually warmed my heart. One of our product value streams was really struggling with capacity, and through these meetings determined that the best thing for us to do as an organization is to move some people from one product value stream to another product value stream. So at the end of the day, it's important that you have kind of that we're all in this together, and we are one organization, and making sure that you're flexible with how you're structuring and being willing to make the changes necessary to make things successful.
That's great. All right. We might have time for about 2 more questions or so. The next one is, Nicole, can you expand on viewing dependencies as bad? Not viewing dependencies as bad. Sorry.
Oh. Well, I think there's a lot of talk, and it's certainly true that, anytime there's dependencies, things get more complicated. But I think dependencies kind of get a bad rap, that people are like, well, I have to work on a 2-pizza team and we have to have control of absolutely everything. Well, that's just not realistic, especially in large scale software development. And so rather than kind of going in with the mindset that dependencies are bad, go in with the mindset that dependencies just are, and what do we do to make those dependencies as smooth and as easy to deal with as possible. And I think the previous question relates to that, because I don't even think I liked the answer I gave to that question, because I feel that we don't have great mechanisms for kind of better communication strategies and things when dependencies do exist. Really, my point around dependencies is I just think that we need to go in with a positive attitude around them and recognize that they're going to be there and that that's okay. And kind of that's why I say relish them rather than shirk them.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Next question is, what about project managers from PMO? Do you see them making a transition to a product value stream lead?
I can see, again, as I said, it's really about skill set and what you're interested in. And I think the role of the PMO, that would be an entire additional webinar around the role of the PMO in the future. I was on a panel last week where I can't remember which of the panelists brought this up, but it was super spot on that really, shouldn't we be talking about value management organizations? And that you could envision, and maybe that's to the earlier question about a value stream architect, I could really envision kind of a VMO with value stream architects, and some really interesting roles and approaches coming out of that. So super interesting topic. I do want to make sure that project managers don't feel kind of left out in the cold. There's tremendous value in what project managers do, and also tremendous opportunity to think about what aspects of project management you like, and which ones of those then easily apply to being a product value stream lead or being a product manager. from that perspective. But all of these roles really need to, and this is, I think, why I think maybe, I can't remember which panelist was talking about value management organization. Every role needs to focus on what does my role do to bring value to my customers. That's the most important thing.